Hey guys, tonight we're taking a truly grueling journey, not across the icy seas with the axe in hand, but deep into the roaring heart of a Viking Age settlement to uncover how a Viking blacksmith lived a truly brutal life of labor. Forget the romanticized image of a powerful, revered craftsman effortlessly forging legendary swords. You're about to discover an existence defined by intense heat, deafening noise, back-breaking physical exertion, and constant danger that made every swing of the hammer a testament to sheer, unyielding endurance, and often to profound personal suffering. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the first month as an apprentice without longing for a simpler, if more dangerous, life as a simple farmer. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly transported to a bustling, yet raw and unrefined Viking Age settlement somewhere in Scandinavia, perhaps around the 9th or 10th century CE. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke, livestock, and the distant tang of the sea. But as you draw closer to the heart of the village, a different smell assaults your senses: the acrid bite of burning charcoal, the sharp metallic tang of hot iron, and the pervasive odor of sweat. And then the rhythmic, deafening clang of hammer on anvil, vibrating through the very ground beneath your feet. This is your new home, your prison, and your destiny. You are a Viking blacksmith, and your life of brutal labor begins with a fiery calling, a demanding initiation that will forge your body and spirit. The journey to becoming a Viking blacksmith, or smidar, was not a matter of casual interest. It was a grueling, lifelong commitment that began at a surprisingly young age. You might have been just a boy, perhaps 10 or 12 years old, when you were apprenticed to an experienced master blacksmith. This wasn't a choice often driven by personal ambition, but by necessity and the recognition of your physical aptitude. In a society constantly on the brink of conflict and reliant on iron for tools, weapons, and daily life, the blacksmith was an indispensable, yet often anonymous, figure. Your parents, perhaps seeing your raw strength or a natural inclination for hard work, would effectively sell or bind you to the master, ensuring you learned a vital trade. It truly sucked to have your childhood replaced by the clang of hammers. Your early years as an apprentice would be far from glamorous. You wouldn't immediately touch the glowing iron. Instead, your duties would be menial, physically demanding, and designed to test your endurance and obedience. You'd spend countless hours pumping the bellows to keep the forge fire roaring. A relentless, repetitive task that would leave your arms aching and your lungs burning with the smoke. You'd haul heavy bags of charcoal to fuel the fire, ensuring a constant supply of intense heat. You'd fetch water for quenching and cooling, clean the workshop, and prepare the crude tools. Your days would be long, from dawn until well past dusk, dictated by the relentless demands of the forge. This wasn't just apprenticeship, it was a brutal form of physical conditioning, weeding out the weak and instilling an unwavering work ethic. As you grew older, you would gradually be introduced to the more specialized skills of the trade. Your master would teach you the properties of different types of iron and steel, how to recognize good ore, and the precise temperatures required for various forging techniques. You would learn the fundamental movements: how to hold the hot iron with tongs, how to strike it with the hammer, the basic swing, the precise angle, the follow-through, how to use the anvil effectively, and how to work the bellows in perfect rhythm with the hammer strokes. each movement required immense strength, precision, and coordination. Mistakes were not tolerated, often resulting in severe verbal reprimands or even a painful rap with a hammer handle. It really sucked to learn by fire and pain. The learning process was primarily through observation and repetition. Your master wouldn't explain complex metallurgical theories, he would demonstrate, and you would imitate. Endlessly, you'd spend hours watching his hands, the subtle flick of his wrist, the powerful arc of his swing, trying to replicate his movements with your own aching muscles. Your body would learn through brute force and muscle memory, slowly absorbing the ancient techniques passed down through generations. This was a craft learned not through books, but through sweat, blisters, and the searing heat of the forge. The importance of the blacksmith in Viking society cannot be overstated. Iron was the backbone of their technology, their warfare, and their daily lives. You wouldn't just be forging weapons, you'd be making plowshares for farmers, hinges for longhouses, tools for carpenters, nails for longships, and even intricate jewelry. Your skills touched every aspect of Viking existence, making you a vital, indispensable member of the community. Yet, this indispensability came at an immense personal cost. One common misconception is that all Viking blacksmiths were specialized in making only weapons. In reality, while weapon crafting was often the most prestigious and lucrative aspect of their work, most Viking blacksmiths were generalists, capable of making and repairing a wide range of iron tools, domestic implements, and agricultural equipment. Their versatility was crucial for the self-sufficiency of a Viking settlement, particularly in remote areas. This meant their daily tasks were incredibly diverse, but consistently physically demanding. From forging a sword to repairing a broken axe head for a farmer. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of Viking Age smithies, analyzing the tools and iron remnants to understand the full scope of a blacksmith's daily workload and the diverse range of items they produced, confirming their vital generalist role. Furthermore, the very act of living in a Viking Age settlement, while perhaps offering a sense of community, also meant a lack of modern amenities. Sanitation was rudimentary, living conditions often harsh, and medical knowledge primitive. These broader societal conditions compounded the brutality of your specific profession, ensuring that your life as a blacksmith was not just difficult due to the forge, but due to the inherent challenges of the era itself. You were an essential professional in a hard world, making your life doubly brutal. Your social standing as a blacksmith was complex. You were respected for your essential skills. A good blacksmith was highly valued, especially one who could craft fine weapons or intricate tools. Your knowledge of iron, a mysterious and powerful substance, might even lend you a mystical aura, associating you with deities like Thor, who wielded a hammer. However, despite this respect, your life was still one of relentless labor, often dirty, and your hands were calloused, not clean like a chieftain's. Your wealth, while potentially greater than a common farmer's, would be constantly reinvested in raw materials like iron ore and charcoal, and your physical appearance would quickly betray the arduous nature of your work. So, your initiation into the life of a Viking blacksmith was not just an apprenticeship, it was a rigorous, all-consuming transformation. From pumping bellows and hauling charcoal to learning the brutal artistry of the hammer and anvil. Your earliest years were defined by immense physical exertion, harsh discipline, and an unwavering commitment to a trade that was both vital and profoundly demanding. This fiery calling, this relentless early training was the first, and perhaps most foundational, aspect of how a Viking blacksmith lived a truly brutal life of labor. Having endured the grueling initiation of your apprenticeship, you, the aspiring Viking blacksmith, are now fully immersed in the heart of your trade, the forge. Forget quaint, picturesque workshops. This was a profoundly oppressive, dangerous, and physically punishing environment dominated by intense heat, suffocating smoke, and a deafening, incessant clamor that made every working day a truly brutal ordeal. Imagine your workplace. It's often a simple, unadorned structure, perhaps a small, enclosed hut or a lean-to adjacent to a longhouse with minimal ventilation. The central feature is the forge smidja itself, a hearth dug into the ground or built up of stone, fueled by charcoal around it. The air is thick, pungent, and oppressive. Your entire existence revolves around this fiery pit, and its immediate surroundings become a constant assault on your senses. It truly sucked to have your workplace be a literal inferno. The heat is intense and relentless. The forge fire, constantly roaring to life, generating temperatures hot enough to make iron pliable, radiates an immense amount of heat directly onto your body. You stand or crouch perpetually close to this inferno, your skin constantly exposed to its searing warmth. In summer, the forge becomes an unbearable oven, leading to profuse sweating, rapid dehydration, and the constant risk of heat stroke. In winter, while it might offer some temporary respite from the biting cold outside, the extreme contrast between the frigid air just beyond the forge's reach and the searing heat at its heart could exacerbate respiratory issues and make recovery from exposure even harder. Your clothes, typically rough woolen or linen tunics, offer little protection, quickly becoming soaked with sweat and clinging uncomfortably to your skin. Then there's the smoke and fumes, the charcoal used to fuel the forge fire while producing intense heat. Also generates significant amounts of carbon monoxide CO, a colorless, odorless, and highly toxic gas in a poorly ventilated space. Carbon monoxide can quickly accumulate, causing headaches, dizziness, nausea, confusion, and at higher concentrations, rapid unconsciousness and death. You would be constantly inhaling these invisible, silent killers, unknowingly poisoning yourself with every breath. Beyond carbon monoxide, the burning charcoal and the working of hot metal would release other particulate matter and noxious fumes into the air, irritating your eyes, nose, throat, and lungs, contributing to chronic respiratory problems. Imagine breathing in toxins with every lungful of air, slowly suffocating yourself with your trade. It really sucked to literally inhale your job. The noise in a Viking blacksmith's forge would be constant and deafening. The rhythmic, thunderous clang of heavy hammers striking red-hot iron on the anvil would reverberate through the enclosed space, pounding relentlessly at your eardrums. This wasn't just occasional noise, it was an incessant, high-decibel assault on your hearing for hours on end, day after day, year after year. Communication would be difficult, requiring shouts and gestures over time. This constant exposure to extreme noise would inevitably lead to permanent hearing loss, slowly rendering you deaf, a silent and insidious occupational hazard that would isolate you from the world around you. Imagine living in a constant ring of metallic thunder, slowly losing your ability to hear the outside world. It really sucked to go deaf for your craft. The air would also be thick with soot and ash from the burning charcoal, and fine metal particles chipped off during hammering. These airborne particulates would settle on every surface, coating your skin, hair, and clothes in a layer of grime, more dangerously, they would be inhaled deep into your lungs, contributing to chronic respiratory ailments and potentially conditions like pneumoconiosis, lung disease caused by dust inhalation, akin to black lung in coal miners. Your body would slowly accumulate this internal soot, scarring your lungs and making every breath a struggle. Poor ventilation was a major contributing factor to all these hazards. Early Viking smithies had rudimentary ventilation systems, often just a hole in the roof or a simple flue to direct some smoke away, but these were rarely efficient enough to effectively clear the heavy smoke, fumes, and dust, especially in smaller, more enclosed workshops. You were perpetually working in a hazardous atmosphere, your life dependent on the inefficient movement of stale, toxic air. The physical confinement of the forge also added to the oppression. You would spend the vast majority of your working hours within the relatively small, enclosed space of the smithy, surrounded by tools, raw materials, and the constant heat of the forge. This lack of open space, combined with the sensory assault, could be mentally oppressive, contributing to a sense of being trapped within your own demanding profession. One common misconception is that ancient blacksmiths worked in open, airy spaces, while some larger communal or temporary outdoor forges might have existed. The need to contain heat and control drafts for efficient metalworking often meant smithies were enclosed, leading to the buildup of heat, smoke, and noise. The very effectiveness of the forge depended on its ability to concentrate heat, inadvertently creating a hazardous environment for the smith. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of Viking Age smithies, analyzing their layout, ventilation systems, and remnants of charcoal and metal to understand the precise working conditions and their impact on blacksmiths' health. Furthermore, the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning was real and silent. Unlike other dangers that were visible or audible, carbon monoxide offered no warning. A sudden headache or dizziness might be misinterpreted as simple fatigue, allowing the gas to build up to lethal concentrations, silently claiming the life of a hard-working smith who simply collapsed at his anvil, leaving his demise a mystery to his community, attributed perhaps to a sudden illness or divine displeasure. This invisible killer was a constant, terrifying possibility. The psychological toll of working in such a harsh, relentless environment cannot be overstated. The constant heat, the suffocating smoke, the deafening noise, and the pervasive awareness of unseen dangers would erode your spirit. You would live with a perpetual sense of exhaustion and perhaps a quiet desperation, knowing that your life was defined by this unending sensory and physical assault. The forge, while the source of your livelihood, was also a constant source of profound misery, transforming you into a resilient yet deeply suffering individual. So, your daily life as a Viking blacksmith was fundamentally defined by the environment of the forge, a relentless, physically oppressive space saturated with intense heat, suffocating smoke, toxic fumes, and deafening noise. This constant sensory and physical assault made every working day a truly brutal ordeal, ensuring that the creation of every sword, every axe, and every tool was paid for not just with skill and sweat, but with the profound, slow suffering of the smith himself. Even as you toiled in the oppressive heat and deafening clamor of the forge, your life as a Viking blacksmith was fundamentally defined by the relentless, physically destructive labor itself. Forget gentle tapping or artistic flourishes. You were a human machine, constantly wielding heavy tools to shape unyielding metal, hour after hour, day after day, making your contribution to Viking society a truly brutal and body-breaking ordeal. Imagine your primary task hammering iron. This wasn't a delicate process. You would grasp a pair of tongs, firmly holding a piece of red-hot iron extracted from the forge. Then, with immense strength and precise rhythm, you would strike it repeatedly with a heavy hammer against the anvil. The hammer itself could weigh anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds, 2.3 to 6.8 kilos, and you would swing it with full force, hundreds, even thousands of times a day. Your entire body would be involved in each swing. Your back, your shoulders, your arms, your core, all straining with the effort. This relentless, repetitive impact, feeling the shock reverberate through your bones, was the very essence of your work. It truly sucked to literally hammer your body to pieces. The purpose of this hammering was to shape the metal. You'd be forging a sword blade, flattening a piece of iron for a tool, drawing out a spike for a longship, or upsetting thickening metal for an axe head. Each type of work required a specific type of blow, a particular angle, and a precise rhythm. This demanded not just brute strength, but also incredible endurance and precision. You had to maintain the rhythm and force for extended periods, even as sweat poured from your brow and your muscles screamed in protest. Any lapse in focus or strength could result in a misstrike, damaging the metal and wasting precious raw material, or more dangerously, causing the hammer to glance off the workpiece and strike your own body. Beyond the hammer, you would use a range of other crude but heavy tools. Tongs to hold the glowing metal, requiring strong grip and heat resistance, punches and drifts to create holes, driven through the hot metal with massive blows, chisels to cut and separate the iron. Each tool required immense force to operate, and every interaction with the hot metal was a dance with potential injury. Your hands, even when protected by leather wraps, would be constantly at risk of burns, blisters, and crushing injuries. The physical toll of this relentless labor was immense and cumulative. Your shoulders and back would be perpetually aching, strained by the constant heavy swinging. Your arms and wrists would suffer from the repetitive impacts, potentially leading to chronic pain or conditions that would severely limit your mobility in later life. Your legs, too, would ache from hours of standing and bracing yourself against the force of your hammer blows. Your entire skeletal and muscular system was under constant, extreme stress. The very act of forging required you to work the metal while it was hot. This meant constant, precise timing. You would pull a piece of iron from the forge, quickly shape it with a few powerful blows, then return it to the fire as it cooled and became too hard to work. This cycle of heating, hammering, and reheating would repeat endlessly, demanding your full attention and relentless physical output. There were no breaks, no pauses, no moments of true rest until the metal was shaped to your satisfaction. It really sucked to literally have a deadline set by glowing metal. For certain tasks, like forging larger implements or pattern-welded sword blades, which involved welding together multiple layers of different types of iron and steel, you might require the assistance of an apprentice or a striker. This apprentice would use a larger, heavier hammer, striking the metal as you guided it with smaller, more precise blows. This collaborative effort, while reducing some of the individual burden, required immense coordination and trust, as a single mistimed strike could be disastrous for both of you. It also meant you were responsible for guiding not just the metal, but another human being's powerful, potentially dangerous, hammer swings. One common misconception is that all Viking Age iron was of uniformly high quality. In reality, the quality of iron and steel varied greatly depending on the ore source and the smelting techniques, often bloomeries, which produced small, inconsistent blooms of iron. A significant part of the blacksmith's skill lay in discerning good quality metal, recognizing impurities, and then working the iron meticulously to achieve the desired strength and hardness. often through repeated heating, hammering, and folding, a process particularly crucial for sword blades, making them stronger and more flexible. This added a layer of complexity and physical effort to ensure the final product was reliable. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of Viking Age metal slag and finished iron artifacts to understand the precise metallurgical knowledge and techniques of these ancient smiths. Furthermore, the lack of safety equipment exacerbated the physical dangers. There were no safety glasses, no steel-toed boots, no protective gloves. Your hands, faces, and eyes were constantly exposed to flying sparks, hot metal fragments, and the concussive force of the hammer. A stray piece of hot slag could cause a severe burn. A glancing blow from the hammer could crush a finger, and flying sparks could blind you. These were common occurrences, leading to chronic pain, permanent disfigurement, and ultimately a shortened, painful life. The psychological toll of this relentless labor was immense. The constant physical exertion, the pervasive pain, and the sheer monotony of the work would erode your spirit. You would live with a perpetual sense of exhaustion, your body aching even in rest. The satisfaction of a well-forged piece might be fleeting, quickly replaced by the demands of the next task. Your life was a continuous cycle of physical struggle, a testament to your unyielding endurance, but also to the brutal exploitation of your strength. So, your daily life as a Viking blacksmith was fundamentally defined by relentless, physically destructive labor. You were a human machine, wielding heavy hammers to shape unyielding metal, hour after hour, day after day, in an arduous, repetitive cycle of brute force and precision. This pervasive, body-breaking toil was a defining, brutal human cost, ensuring that every piece of iron that emerged from your forge was literally hammered into existence with your sweat, your pain, and the slow, relentless erosion of your own body. Even as your hands ached from relentless hammering and your lungs struggled in the smoky forge, your life as a Viking blacksmith was inexorably linked to the vital, yet dangerous, process of specialized craftsmanship. Forget simply banging on metal. You were a master of creating not just tools, but deadly weaponry, requiring meticulous, often secretive, techniques that made your life profoundly brutal. Imagine the immense demand for your most prized creations weapons in the Viking Age. A sword was more than a tool. It was a symbol of status, a protector of life, and an instrument of conquest. Axes, spears, and helmet components were equally crucial. Raids, battles, and the constant threat of conflict meant that your skills as a weaponsmith were in perpetual demand. You were the armorer for your settlement's warriors, your craft directly enabling their ventures and ensuring their survival. This pressure to produce reliable, lethal weapons was immense. It truly sucked to have lives depend on your hammer swings. The process of creating high-quality weapons, especially swords, was incredibly demanding and often shrouded in secrecy. Viking smiths were renowned for their pattern-welded blades, a technique that involved forge welding together multiple layers of different types of iron and steel. Imagine heating strips of metal to white-hot temperatures, then twisting, folding, and hammering them together repeatedly, over and over again, for hours on end. This process removed impurities, blended different carbon contents, and created a strong, flexible, and beautifully patterned blade. It required immense strength, precise temperature control, and an artistic eye to achieve the desired effect. Each fold doubled the layers, creating a complex, resilient structure, but also dramatically increasing your labor. This intricate forging was often done in stages, each requiring specific temperatures and hammering techniques. Too cold, and the metal would crack, too hot, and it would burn. The precise control, the keen eye for the metal's color, and the intuitive feel for its malleability were skills honed over years of brutal practice. You might spend days or even weeks on a single sword blade, perfecting every fold and weld, knowing that a single mistake could ruin hours of effort and waste precious material. It really sucked to literally have to feel the temperature of metal with your soul. Beyond the blade itself, you were responsible for forging the entire weapon, the hilt, the pommel, the guard. Each component required meticulous shaping and fitting, often incorporating intricate designs or even precious metal inlays like silver or gold. If commissioned by a wealthy jarl, this added another layer of delicate craftsmanship to your otherwise brutal work. Demanding of versatility that few other trades possessed, the secrecy of your techniques was paramount. The most skilled blacksmiths, particularly those capable of crafting pattern-welded blades or superior steel, guarded their methods closely. This wasn't just professional pride, it was economic and strategic protection. Your unique knowledge of metallurgy, passed down orally from master to apprentice, gave you a vital edge and ensured your indispensability. Imagine the pressure to remember every step, every subtle nuance, knowing that your family's future and your settlement's military strength depended on your guarded knowledge. You weren't just making weapons for war. Your specialized skills extended to a wide range of essential iron goods. You would forge and repair agricultural tools like plowshares, sickles, and axes for farmers, ensuring the very sustenance of the community. You would craft and maintain domestic implements, knives, hinges, cooking pots, and even intricate locks for longhouses. And crucially, you would forge essential components for the Viking longships, the nails, rivets, and fittings that held these magnificent vessels together, enabling raids, trade, and exploration. Your hands literally built the foundations of Viking society. It really sucked to be a one-man hardware store. One common misconception is that all Viking swords were made of pattern-welded steel, while highly prized. This was a very labor-intensive and costly process, often reserved for high-status warriors. Many Viking swords were simpler, monosteel constructions. Though still robust and effective, the existence of pattern welding, however, demonstrates the advanced metallurgical knowledge and sophisticated techniques possessed by the most skilled Viking blacksmiths, setting them apart as true masters of their craft. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of Viking Age metal artifacts, using modern metallurgical analysis to reveal the complex processes and diverse qualities of iron and steel produced by ancient smiths. Furthermore, the demand for your services was often driven by the unpredictable nature of Viking life. A sudden call for a raid, a lost axe in battle, or a broken plow in the middle of planting season would mean immediate, urgent demand for your skills. This meant you were often working under immense pressure, with little rest, to meet critical deadlines, ensuring that your life was a constant cycle of intense, demanding labor, dictated by the needs of your community. So, your life as a Viking blacksmith was profoundly brutal due to the relentless demands of specialized craftsmanship. You were a master of shaping unyielding metal, creating vital tools and deadly weapons through meticulous, physically destructive techniques. This unwavering commitment to your complex, often secretive, trade, under constant pressure and in a perilous environment, ensured that every product of your forge was literally hammered into existence with your sweat, your skill, and the slow, relentless erosion of your own body. Even as your powerful hammer shaped metal and your skilled hands crafted deadly weapons, your life as a Viking blacksmith was a constant dance with terrifying danger. Forget minor workplace hazards. You face perpetual threats from intense heat, flying debris, and potential explosions, making every working day a profound and brutal gamble with your life and limbs. Imagine your constant proximity to the intense heat of the forge. You would repeatedly plunge your hands, protected only by crude leather gloves or wraps, near the glowing heart of the fire to retrieve iron. The radiant heat on your face and arms was relentless, causing profuse sweating and constant discomfort, but the real danger was accidental contact, a momentary lapse in focus, a slipped tongue, or a piece of metal twisting unexpectedly could lead to severe burns. Imagine the searing agony of hot iron fusing to your skin, the smell of burning flesh, and the permanent scarring that would follow, often leaving hands and fingers disfigured and stiff, limiting your very ability to work. It truly sucked to be branded by your own work. Then there was the terrifying threat of flying sparks and hot metal fragments. Every forceful hammer blow on the anvil sent a shower of incandescent sparks and tiny, razor-sharp fragments of iron flying through the air. You would constantly be exposed to these projectiles, which could cause painful skin burns, severe eye injuries, or even become embedded in your clothing. Without modern safety glasses, your eyes were particularly vulnerable. A single, errant spark could land in your eye, causing irreparable damage, leading to blindness or severe vision impairment. Imagine losing your sight, your most crucial sense for your precise craft, to a tiny piece of metal. It really sucked to go blind by a spark. The explosion of furnaces or forges was a rarer, but far more catastrophic danger. While Viking forges were relatively simple, using charcoal and bellows, a buildup of gases in a confined space, or a sudden thermal shock to the heated stone or clay lining could potentially lead to a violent rupture. Imagine the terrifying suddenness of an explosion, sending superheated gases, flaming charcoal, and sharp fragments of stone flying through your workshop, burying you or your apprentices under debris, causing severe burns, concussions, or instant death. This unpredictability, the knowledge that your workplace could violently erupt, was a constant, underlying terror beyond sudden, explosive events. There was the constant risk of accidents from heavy tools and materials. Your hammers were heavy, your tongs long, and the raw iron or steel billets were cumbersome. A slipped hammer could crush a finger or toe. A dropped piece of hot iron could burn through your foot. A heavy anvil, if improperly set, could shift and cause severe injury. The lack of proper safety protocols, combined with perpetual exhaustion and the physical demands of the work, made every lift, every strike, every movement a potential hazard. It really sucked to be injured by your own tools. The very smoke and fumes from the forge, while contributing to long-term health issues, also posed immediate dangers. As discussed in Chapter 2, Carbon Monoxide, CO, an odorless, invisible, and lethal gas, was always present in poorly ventilated smithies. Acute carbon monoxide poisoning could lead to sudden dizziness, confusion, collapse, and rapid death. Many blacksmiths might have simply slumped over their anvils, silently suffocated by the very byproduct of their trade. Their deaths attributed to sudden illness, rather than the silent killer lurking in their workspace. Imagine feeling suddenly lightheaded, your limbs heavy, before everything goes black. Knowing you are dying without a sound. One unique detail, sometimes found in Viking Age burial sites, are skeletal remains of blacksmiths identified through grave goods like smithing tools that show signs of repeated trauma, healed fractures, and specific bone pathologies consistent with heavy manual labor and accidental injuries. These archaeological findings provide grim, direct evidence of the constant physical dangers blacksmiths faced, confirming the high frequency of non-fatal injuries and serious accidents that were a common part of their lives. Historians still meticulously study these osteological records to piece together a clearer picture of occupational hazards in the Viking Age. Furthermore, the lack of rapid medical response or modern emergency care meant that even non-fatal injuries often became life-threatening. A severe burn, left untreated or treated with rudimentary herbal poultices, would quickly become infected, leading to pus, fever, and potentially fatal sepsis. A broken bone, if improperly set, could lead to permanent disfigurement or disability, rendering you unable to work and thus unable to provide for your family. A deep cut, exposed to the grimy conditions of the workshop, could fester into a deadly infection. Your survival after an accident was often a matter of sheer luck and your body's raw resilience, rather than any effective medical intervention. The psychological toll of constantly facing such dangers would be immense. You would live with a perpetual sense of anxiety, constantly vigilant, knowing that one careless moment could cost you a limb, your sight, or your life. The sight of your fellow smiths suffering severe injuries, or succumbing to the invisible dangers, would serve as a constant, chilling reminder of your own precarious mortality. This pervasive fear of sudden, violent accident was a defining, soul-crushing burden, ensuring that even when you were not actively forging metal, the forge itself was forging a profound sense of dread within you. So, your daily life as a Viking blacksmith was a relentless dance with death, defined by perpetual danger from intense heat, flying sparks, invisible gases, and heavy tools. This constant, terrifying threat of severe injury or sudden demise was a defining, profoundly brutal aspect of your labor, ensuring that every piece of iron that emerged from your forge was literally hammered into existence with your sweat, your skill, and the profound, omnipresent risk to your very being, even as your body suffered the relentless physical toll of the forge and battled constant danger. Your life as a Viking blacksmith was inexorably linked to a range of chronic, debilitating health decay. Forget a long, healthy life. Your demanding profession exposed you to unique occupational hazards that systematically eroded your body, drastically shortening your lifespan and making your existence profoundly brutal. Imagine your internal world, day in and day out. You breathed in air thick with soot, ash, and fine metal particles generated by the roaring forge and the hammering of iron. This wasn't just unpleasant, it was a slow, insidious poisoning of your respiratory system. The constant inhalation would lead to chronic coughing, bronchitis, and debilitating lung diseases akin to modern pneumoconiosis or silicosis, often called black lung in coal miners. Your lungs would gradually become scarred and hardened, making every breath a labored struggle. Over years, this cumulative damage would lead to shortness of breath, chronic pain, and eventually a slow, agonizing death from respiratory failure. It truly sucked to literally choke on your profession. Your eyes were under constant assault. The intense glare from the glowing iron in the forge, coupled with the perpetual showers of sparks and tiny metal fragments, caused severe strain and damage. Without modern safety glasses, your eyes were perpetually exposed. This constant exposure would lead to chronic irritation, inflammation, and over time, could result in serious vision impairment, cataracts, or even blindness. Imagine your vision slowly dimming, making it increasingly difficult to perform the precise work of your craft, turning your most vital sense into a source of constant pain and eventual darkness. It really sucked to go blind for your craft. Your hearing would also suffer a dramatic decline. The incessant, deafening clang of your heavy hammer striking the anvil, reverberating through the enclosed space of the smithy, created a continuous, high decibel assault on your eardrums. This constant noise pollution, experienced for hours each day, would inevitably lead to permanent hearing loss. You would gradually become deaf, losing the ability to hear normal conversation, isolating you from your family and community, and making communication a constant struggle. Imagine living in a world that slowly grew silent around you. Your life's soundtrack replaced by the phantom ringing of your forge. It really sucked to be deafened by your own work. The musculoskeletal system bore the brunt of relentless physical strain, the constant, heavy hammering, the lifting of heavy raw materials and finished products, and the prolonged standing would lead to chronic back pain, shoulder problems, and joint degeneration. You'd suffer from persistent muscle strains, tendinitis, and premature arthritis in your hands, wrists, elbows, and shoulders. Your body would be perpetually aching, stiff, and prone to injury, making even simple movements outside the forge a source of discomfort. Your physique, though powerful in youth, would quickly become gnarled and broken, bearing the visible marks of your brutal trade. Furthermore, the lack of hygiene and primitive medical care compounded these occupational hazards. Burns from hot metal, cuts from sharp tools, and blisters from constant friction are common. These wounds, exposed to the sooty, unsterile environment of the forge, would frequently become infected. Without modern antiseptics or antibiotics, a simple cut could fester into a life-threatening infection, leading to gangrene or fatal sepsis. Even a successful cure might involve crude methods that left you permanently disfigured or disabled, ensuring a shortened, painful life. It really sucked to survive battle only to get a deadly infection from your forge. One common misconception is that Viking Age people, being closer to nature, had a more robust natural immunity. In reality, while they adapted to certain environmental pressures, their overall health was often compromised by poor sanitation, malnutrition, and a lack of scientific medical understanding. Professions like blacksmithing carried distinct, severe occupational diseases that significantly reduced lifespan. Archaeological studies of Viking Age skeletal remains often show high incidences of dental problems due to abrasive diets, bone fractures from accidents and violence, and signs of chronic joint disease, particularly in individuals whose burial goods suggest they were craftsmen. Historians and bioarchaeologists still meticulously study these osteological records to understand the specific occupational hazards and health profiles of various professions in the Viking Age. The chronic exposure to carbon monoxide, as discussed in Chapter 2, was another silent killer. While acute poisoning could lead to immediate collapse, lower level, chronic exposure could cause persistent headaches, fatigue, dizziness, and long-term neurological damage, contributing to a general decline in cognitive function and overall well-being, further deteriorating your health insidiously over time without clear, immediate symptoms. The psychological toll of watching your body slowly succumb to the effects of your work, knowing there was no escape, would be immense. You would literally feel your lungs failing, your vision dimming, your hearing fading, all caused by the very craft you dedicated your life to. This slow, agonizing decay, combined with the constant threat of accidents and the bleakness of your outlook, would lead to profound despair, a silent testament to the blacksmith's ultimate sacrifice. So, your life as a Viking blacksmith was profoundly brutal due to the insidious, long-term health decay caused by your profession. The constant inhalation of smoke and metal dust, the relentless assault on your eyes and ears, and the cumulative physical strain systematically eroded your body. This pervasive and agonizing physical decline, guaranteeing a shortened, painful life, was a defining, brutal aspect of your labor, ensuring that every piece of iron that emerged from your forge was literally hammered into existence with your sweat, your skill, and the profound, irreversible damage to your own body, even as your body slowly succumbed to the relentless assault of the forge and your health decayed from chronic occupational hazards. Your life as a Viking blacksmith was further defined by a different kind of burden, social perception. Forget universal respect, your demanding, dirty, and often smelly trade often brought with it a subtle, yet pervasive, social stigma, making your existence profoundly brutal. Imagine yourself outside the forge, perhaps after a long day's work. The smell of burning charcoal, hot iron, and sweat would cling to you like a second skin, permeating your clothes, your hair, and your pores. This wasn't just a temporary odor, it was a pervasive, inescapable stench that marked you as a blacksmith. While Viking society wasn't as rigidly stratified as some later medieval societies, and cleanliness standards were different from ours, pervasive, strong odors, especially those associated with dirty labor, were often viewed negatively. People could smell you before they saw you. It truly sucked to be perpetually smelly. This constant smell, combined with the visible marks of your trade, soot-stained hands and face, calloused and gnarled fingers, perhaps the scar of an old burn or a missing digit would subtly set you apart, while your skills were indispensable. Your person was often seen as dirty or unclean by those who performed less physically demanding or cleaner work, like farmers who dealt with the earth, or chieftains who dealt with administration. You inhabited a space that was essential, but also inherently messy and unpleasant. The reputation of blacksmiths was complex on one hand. You were highly respected for your vital skills. You forged the tools that built longships, the axes that cleared forests, and the swords that won battles. Your knowledge of iron, a mysterious and powerful substance, might even lend you a mystical aura, associating you with deities like Thor, who wielded a hammer forged for him, or legendary figures like Volin the Smith. People recognized your indispensable contribution to the community's survival and prosperity. A good smith was a valuable asset, sought after for their craft. However, this respect was often tinged with a degree of fear or wariness. Your association with fire, with the raw, untamed power of metal, and with the crafting of deadly weapons, could make people view you with a certain apprehension. The clang of your hammer, the smoke from your forge, the sparks flying through the air, these elements, while signs of your craft, also evoked a primal sense of danger and power that set you apart. You were essential, but also a little bit scary. A figure who dealt in elemental forces, it really sucked to be feared for your power. This complex social perception could lead to a subtle form of social ostracization. While you were part of the community and likely had your own family, you might not be fully integrated into all aspects of Viking social life. People might avoid sitting too close to you at feasts or hesitate to share food from your hands. Your rough appearance, your calloused hands, and your pervasive smell would serve as constant reminders of your laborious, dirty profession, creating a social distance that few other trades endured. You were accepted for your function, but perhaps not fully for your person. Furthermore, your work often tied you to a specific location, your forge, unlike farmers who might travel to market or warriors who went on raids. Your daily life was centered around the constant demands of your smithy, this rootedness, while providing stability could also limit your social interactions to your immediate community, potentially reinforcing any local biases or stigmas associated with your trade. You were tied to the fire, both physically and socially. One common misconception is that all Viking Age craftsmen enjoyed high social status, while skilled artisans like jewelers or highly specialized weaponsmiths might have held considerable esteem. The general blacksmith who, as discussed in Chapter 4, was often a generalist making mundane tools, as well often occupied a more ambiguous position. Their indispensability was clear, but the dirty, dangerous nature of their work could place them below farmers or warriors in social prestige, particularly those who were landed or held political power. Historians still meticulously study various Viking Age sagas, archaeological evidence of settlement layouts, and social structures to understand the nuanced social hierarchies and the precise standing of different professions within Viking communities. The psychological toll of this subtle social stigma would be immense. You would be constantly aware of how others perceived you, the unspoken glances, the subtle recoiling. This could lead to feelings of shame, resentment, or a deep sense of being perpetually marked by your profession, even if you were proud of your craft. The constant reminder of society's disdain for its dirty realities would erode your self-esteem, making your daily life a silent battle against external judgment and internal acceptance. So, your life as a Viking blacksmith was profoundly brutal, not just for its physical demands, but for the pervasive and inescapable social stigma that clung to you. Your constant smell, your rough appearance, and the fear associated with your trade marked you as an outsider, an essential yet unclean member of society. This subtle yet constant social ostracization was a defining, soul-crushing burden, ensuring that your livelihood was earned not just with sweat and skill, but with a profound and persistent sense of otherness, even as your body slowly succumbed to the relentless assault of the forge and your spirit battled social stigma. Your life as a Viking blacksmith was inexorably shaped by constant demands. Forget leisurely crafting or working at your own pace. The unyielding pressure to produce weapons and tools, especially during periods of Viking expansion and raiding, ensured your life was a perpetual grind, making it profoundly brutal. Imagine the needs of your community. The Viking Age was a period of intense activity raids, trade, exploration, and settlement. All of these activities relied heavily on high-quality iron tools and weapons, and you, the blacksmith, were the indispensable provider. Your skills were in constant demand, and there was rarely a moment of true idleness in your forge. It truly sucked to be too important to ever rest. The most urgent demands would come during periods of Viking expansion and raiding, when the Jarl chieftain called for a raid. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of warriors would prepare their ships and weapons. You would be working frantically, day and night, to forge new axe heads, sharpen sword blades, repair shields, and create spear points. The fate of the raid, the lives of your community's warriors, and the potential plunder all hinged on your ability to produce reliable, lethal weapons quickly. Imagine the immense pressure, the sleepless nights, forging by the flickering light of your forge, knowing that every weapon you made could be the difference between victory and defeat. It really sucked to be responsible for everyone's killing tools. Beyond weapons, the demands for tools and implements were equally relentless. Farmers needed new plowshares and sickles. Carpenters required axes, chisels, and adzes for building longhouses and ships. Fishermen needed hooks and spearheads. Every aspect of daily life in a Viking settlement relied on your continuous output. A broken tool meant lost time. A damaged plow meant a threatened harvest, and a delayed repair could impact the entire community's well-being. This created a constant stream of urgent requests, ensuring your forge was rarely cold. The construction of longships, the very symbol of Viking power and exploration, placed immense demands on blacksmiths. These magnificent vessels required thousands of iron rivets, nails, and various fittings to hold their planks together and secure their sails. You would be tasked with forging these countless pieces, each one vital for the ship's seaworthiness and speed. Imagine hammering thousands of rivets, one by one, ensuring each was perfectly shaped and strong enough to withstand the stresses of the open sea. This was a long, arduous task, often done under immense pressure to complete ships for the next raiding season. It really sucked to literally nail together everyone's fate. The seasonal nature of Viking activities also influenced your workload. Spring and summer, the raiding and farming seasons, would be periods of intense demand for weapons and tools. But even in winter, you might be busy with repairs, forging domestic implements, or preparing for the next year's campaigns. There was no true off-season for a blacksmith, only shifts in the type and urgency of the work. The pressure to meet these demands was enforced not just by your own work ethic, but by the expectations of your community and your lord. A good blacksmith was indispensable and respected, but a slow or unreliable one would quickly lose favor, potentially even facing the wrath of a chieftain whose raid was delayed by dull axes. This created a constant drive for efficiency and tireless labor, pushing you to your physical and mental limits daily. One common misconception is that Viking blacksmiths were entirely independent artisans, working solely at their own pace, while some certainly owned their own smithies. Many were also retainers of a jarl or chieftain, residing within their households or settlements, and bound by duty to provide essential services on demand. This client-patron relationship meant your output was often dictated by the needs and ambitions of your lord, adding a layer of obligation to your constant work. Historians still meticulously study Viking Age settlement patterns and the location of smithies within them to understand the precise economic and social relationship between blacksmiths and the wider community, including any feudal obligations or patronage systems that influence their workload. Furthermore, the very physical environment of the Viking Age, with its reliance on manual labor for everything, meant that tools broke constantly. A harsh winter could snap an axe handle. A rocky field could blunt a plowshare. And constant use meant wear and tear on every implement. This perpetual need for repair and replacement ensured a constant backlog of work for you, the blacksmith. You were not just a creator, you were also a relentless repairman for an entire community. The constant demands left little time for leisure, rest, or personal pursuits. Your life was consumed by work, dictated by the needs of a society perpetually engaged in raiding, farming, and building. Your body, already suffering from the inherent dangers of the forge, was further exhausted by this relentless pace, ensuring that your lifespan, already precarious, was shortened by constant toil. The satisfaction of a well-forged blade or a repaired tool was fleeting, quickly replaced by the next urgent request. So your life as a Viking blacksmith was profoundly brutal due to the constant demands placed upon your skill and labor, the unyielding pressure to produce weapons for raids, tools for survival, and components for longships, often under immense time constraints, ensured your forge was rarely cold and your body rarely rested. This relentless, unyielding expectation was a defining, soul-crushing aspect of your existence, ensuring that every piece of iron that left your hands was a testament to your endless, brutal labor, even as your powerful hands tirelessly hammered metal and your spirit endured constant demands. Your life as a Viking blacksmith, for all its indispensable nature, left you with little time for anything beyond relentless work. Forget leisurely evenings or quiet family time. Your existence was a perpetual cycle of work, and more work, ensuring that you experienced little true respite or personal freedom, making your life profoundly brutal. Imagine your daily schedule. It would begin before dawn, often in the deep, cold gloom of a Scandinavian morning. You'd be among the first to rise, making your way to your smithy to rekindle the forge fire, pumping the bellows, adding charcoal, and waiting for the iron to heat would consume the early hours. Then, the rhythmic clang of your hammer on the anvil would begin, a sound that often continued, almost unbroken, until well past dusk or even deep into the night. By the flickering light of oil lamps or torches, your workday was not dictated by a clock, but by the relentless demands of the metal and the needs of your community. It truly sucked to have your alarm clock be the sun and your quitting time be exhaustion. There were no defined weekends or holidays as we understand them today. While Viking society had feast days and religious festivals, your participation might be limited by the urgent demands of your trade. A broken axe before a raid, a snapped plowshare during planting season, these emergencies would override any personal plans. Forcing you back to the forge regardless of the time or day, your skills were too vital to allow for extended periods of idleness. You were perpetually on call, a crucial cog in the survival of your settlement. Your breaks, when they occurred, would be brief and purely functional, a quick, often cold, meal snatched between hammering sessions, a few moments to wipe sweat from your brow or to stretch your aching back. There was little opportunity for true mental or physical rest, for stepping away from the intense heat, the deafening noise, and the pervasive fumes of the forge. Even when you rested, the echoes of the hammer might still reverberate in your ears, and the smell of charcoal would cling to your every fiber. It really sucked to literally never leave work. This relentless work schedule meant a profound lack of personal leisure. You wouldn't have time for hobbies, for philosophical debates like a Greek citizen, for playing games, or for simply relaxing with friends and family. Your life was almost entirely consumed by your craft. Any personal interests you might have harbored would be sidelined by the constant demands of your profession, leaving you with little opportunity for self-enrichment or personal growth outside the confines of your smithy. Your family life would also be profoundly impacted. While your family might live in the same longhouse or nearby dwelling, your waking hours would be spent in the forge, leaving little time for meaningful interaction with your wife and children. Your children, particularly your sons, might serve as your apprentices, meaning their lives, too, would be consumed by the relentless labor from a young age, perpetuating the cycle of endless work. The few hours you had at night would be for eating and falling into an exhausted sleep, ready to repeat the cycle again. It really sucked to live with your family but barely see them. The economic reality also reinforced this relentless schedule. While you might be paid in goods, services, or land, your income was directly tied to your output. To maintain your livelihood and acquire precious raw materials like iron ore and charcoal, you had to produce constantly. This financial imperative, coupled with societal demand, created an unyielding pressure to maximize your working hours, ensuring you were always at the forge, beating metal. One common misconception is that all Viking Age labor was shared equally or that specific trades had more flexible schedules, while some tasks like farming were seasonal. Crafts like blacksmithing, essential year-round, demanded continuous attention. The specialized nature of the blacksmith skill, combined with the vital importance of their output, especially weapons and ship parts, meant they were among the most constantly occupied members of Viking society. This continuous demand distinguished their workload from many other, more intermittent forms of labor. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of forge remains and associated settlements to understand patterns of tool wear and production rates, inferring the demanding work schedules of Viking smiths. Furthermore, the very nature of Viking expansion and raiding meant that there was a perpetual need for weapons and repairs. A chieftain preparing for a raid would demand vast quantities of axes, swords, and spearheads. A returning raiding party would need damaged weapons and armor repaired immediately. This cycle of conflict, which defined much of the Viking Age, translated directly into a relentless, unending workload for you, the blacksmith. Ensuring your forge was rarely cold and your hammer rarely silent, you were an essential part of the Viking war machine, and that machine rarely stopped. The psychological toll of this non-stop labor would be immense. You would live in a perpetual state of exhaustion, your body aching even in moments of supposed rest. The sheer monotony of the work, the lack of personal time, and the constant demands would erode your spirit, leaving you with a pervasive sense of weariness and unfulfillment. Your life was defined by your toil, your very being consumed by the relentless rhythm of the hammer. So, your life as a Viking blacksmith was profoundly brutal due to its pervasive reality of work, and more work. You endured a relentless, dawn-to-dusk schedule, with little time for personal leisure, family, or true respite from the physically demanding and dangerous environment of the forge. This unyielding cycle of labor was a defining, soul-crushing aspect of your existence, ensuring that every piece of iron that emerged from your hands was a testament to your endless, brutal toil and the profound lack of personal freedom that defined your essential craft. You've battled through the grueling apprenticeship, toiled in the suffocating heat and noise of the forge, endured the relentless, body-breaking labor, mastered the dangerous art of specialized craftsmanship, faced constant perils from burns and explosions, struggled with chronic health decay, and lived under the shadow of social stigma and unyielding demands. As the distant clang of your hammer finally fades and the imagined scent of coal smoke dissipates, a profound, chilling truth settles upon you: your life as a Viking blacksmith, despite its indispensable nature, was a truly brutal existence, ultimately culminating in a probable, early, painful, and often anonymous death, making you an unsung hero with a broken body. Consider the physical ruin that defined your later years. Your body, once a testament to strength and endurance, would be a roadmap of chronic pain and irreparable damage. Your lungs, perpetually assaulted by smoke and metal dust, would be scarred and failing, making every breath a struggle against suffocating disease. Your eyes, strained by the forge's glare and flying sparks, would be dimming, perhaps even blind, robbing you of your most vital sense for your craft. Your hearing, battered by the constant hammer blows, would be gone, isolating you in a world of silence. Your joints, stressed by relentless impact, would be gnarled and arthritic, leaving your hands twisted and painful, unable to wield a hammer with their former power. You would be a shadow of your former self, a living testament to the destructive power of your beloved trade. It truly sucked to be alive, but broken. Then there's the constant threat of sudden death that shadowed your every shift. Beyond the chronic diseases, the mine was a place of perpetual accidents, a sudden cave-in, a falling rock, a slipping tool, or an uncontrolled outburst of toxic gas. Any of these could end your life in an instant, without warning or ceremony. You lived with the chilling knowledge that your last breath could come at any moment, trapped in the darkness, alone, far from the sunlit world. This ever-present danger, though perhaps dulled by years of exposure, never truly vanished, making every successful shift a lucky escape. Your social standing, while respected for your vital skills, often translated into a grim isolation, the pervasive smell of your trade, the physical marks of your labor, and the awe or fear of your connection to elemental forces subtly set you apart. You were indispensable, yes, but often viewed as unclean by those who held higher, less arduous positions. Your life was consumed by your work, leaving little time or energy for leisure or deep social connections beyond your immediate family or fellow smiths. This societal distance, born from your very profession, meant that your suffering was often endured in relative solitude, your triumphs uncelebrated beyond the practical utility of your creations. It really sucked to be a necessary outcast. The relentless demands placed upon you, especially during periods of Viking expansion, meant your forge was rarely cold and your body rarely rested. You produced the weapons that forged empires and the tools that built societies, but at an immense personal cost. There were no weekends, no holidays, no true retirement. You worked until your body simply gave out, driven by the needs of your community and the unwavering spirit of your craft. This unyielding cycle of production and demand consumed your life, leaving little space for personal fulfillment beyond the fleeting satisfaction of a well-forged piece. And finally, the anonymous end. For most Viking blacksmiths, despite their vital role, their deaths would likely be unceremonious. No grand sagas would be sung solely of your forge, your body, ravaged by disease or shattered by accident, would likely be buried in a simple grave, marked perhaps by your tools, but often without elaborate ceremony. Your name might be remembered by your family and community for a generation or two, but eventually, you would become one of the countless anonymous laborers whose lives were spent building the Viking Age. The very tools and weapons you crafted would outlive you, silent testaments to your brutal, forgotten toil. It really sucked to be an unsung hero of heavy industry. The concept of a retirement for a Viking blacksmith was often a gradual decline. As your body weakened and your senses dulled, you might gradually transition to lighter tasks, perhaps guiding apprentices or overseeing a smaller, less strenuous forge. However, your life would still be marked by the physical limitations and chronic pain of your profession, ensuring that even your final years were far from comfortable. This slow fade into disability, rather than a peaceful rest, was a grim reality for many. One common misconception is that the creation of legendary Viking swords, like Ulfberht blades, meant that all blacksmiths were highly skilled masters, living a romanticized life of artistic creation, while a few exceptional smiths undoubtedly existed. The vast majority were generalists, constantly engaged in repetitive, basics, and incredibly physically demanding work. The sheer volume of tools and weapons needed for Viking society meant that brute force and relentless production were often prioritized over artistic finesse for most smiths, making their daily lives far more mundane and brutal than legend suggests. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of Viking Age smithies and metal artifacts, distinguishing between high-status items and common tools to understand the precise skill levels and daily realities of different types of blacksmiths. Furthermore, the very act of working with iron and fire, while perhaps lending a mystical aura to the smith, also meant a profound understanding of life and death, creation and destruction. You literally breathed life into inert metal, shaping it for both building and killing. This deep, raw connection to fundamental forces, while powerful, also underscored the ephemeral nature of your own life. A constant reminder that even the most skilled artisan was subject to the same brutal realities as the warrior or the farmer. So, your life as a Viking blacksmith, for all its undeniable importance and occasional flashes of masterful craftsmanship, was a profound and constant, brutal struggle. It was an existence defined by relentless labor, extreme occupational hazards, pervasive health decay, and a silent social marginalization. Your contribution to the Viking Age was immense, but it was paid for with your body, your health, and often your very life, ensuring that you remained an unsung hero with a broken body, a true testament to the brutal reality of ancient labor. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the distant clang of the hammer and the imagined roar of the forge fire finally subside. You're safe, warm, and whole, incredibly far removed from the brutal realities of a Viking blacksmith's existence. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the quiet certainty of health, safety, and the freedom to pursue your own path. A stark contrast to the brutal truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night, and to have sweet dreams.